I'm Malcolm Van Delst, and this is the beginning of a short story or a novel. It's called The 9-Year-Old CEO. Chapter 1, Beowulf. Beowulf looked out the window of his 96th floor office and sighed. It wasn't easy being a 9-year-old CEO, but if he didn't do it, who'd make the games bouncing around in his head? It hadn't been easy getting financing, but once he told Arduino about his plans for several offices around town with secret elevators, rooms, and clubhouses, she quickly saw how things could be and started making phone calls. Beowulf didn't know why a woman was called Arduino. It should have been Arduina. He wasn't sure who Arduino knew or how she did what she did, but it wasn't long before the first round of funding was underway. And by the time they went public, shares were going for $12,000 apiece. They hadn't even published a game yet. But the time was now. Investors were getting nervous. Crash of Santa. It was a good little idea with a simple but compelling storyline. Everyone loves Santa. No one wants to see him crash, especially just before Christmas. But this was the premise Beowulf had chosen for Beowulf and Arduino's first game. Beowulf and Arduino was the name of the company as well as the names of its two principals. Well, Beowulf was the CEO and Arduino the office manager, the chief operating officer. She called herself, whatever. Beowulf didn't care what title she chose as long as she kept delivering the goods, and she did. Beowulf liked to keep things simple, hence the company name. He knew things got complicated enough on their own. Keep it simple, stupid. Kiss. Maybe he was only 9, but he wasn't dumb. Surprisingly, Crash of Santa had gone over gangbusters with the investors. There was a buzz in the industry about the kid genius storming the battlefronts and breaking all the rules. Crashing Santa? Right before Christmas? Beowulf chuckled to himself. He'd known it was good. Thank God Arduino had been able to see that. Sullian, Beowulf called. Sullian! Yeah, Sullian ran into the room, sweeping his Justin Bieber bangs out of his eyes. What's up, boss? How are you doing with that cover art? Fantastic. Do you want to see it? Has Arduino seen it? Yep, we went over the files last night. And? She wanted me to trim Santa down a little. Thought he looked a little, corporate? Corpulent, Beowulf sighed. Yeah, a little corpulent for today's health-conscious parents, she said. So I've been working on that. Sullian was Beowulf's younger brother. Like Beowulf, he was precociously talented. Not only was he an excellent artist, he was a budding YouTuber. His science and engineering videos were quickly amassing thousands of subscribers, and he just hit 1 million views. Disney had called the day before yesterday, and again this morning. I'm not interested in Disney, Sullian had told Arduino. Don't answer their calls unless they offer me a $1 million signing bonus. Wow, Arduino had exclaimed. You play hardball. That I do, Sullian had laughed, but I know what time it is. Arduino had walked out of the room shaking her head. You two boys. Beowulf coughed. Okay, just show me the proofs when they're done, Sullian. Aye, aye, boss, said his brother, giving a mock salute. After Sullian left, Beowulf sat down at his desk. It was so large he couldn't reach across it. Shiny and empty, except for his laptop, his cat's Swatty toy, a photograph of him with the Queen, and a pad of paper. It was one of those things CEOs had to have to impress investors. Beowulf caught sight of himself in the gleaming surface and grinned. He could do it. It was hard, but he knew he could bring this game to the masses. Several years before, Arduino had found Beowulf alone in a dark gutter. Surrounded by cats who mewed when she walked by, one had refused to let her pass, trying to lead her to the street-side bundle. Finally, Arduino relented, followed the animal, and was shocked to find a young child huddled in the rain. She ended up taking the child, Beowulf, home, and surprisingly, one of the cats refused to leave. She had no plans to take on a child, or even a cat for that matter. But the child was bold, smart, and after a bath and a meal, began regaling her with stories about how he was destined to change the world through gaming and how she needed to help him. He couldn't have been more than 3, yet spoke in full sentences. They had to find his brother first, he said. An evil genie had drugged his parents and turned them into his personal slaves, then sold the brothers to a gang of child traders. The genie said he didn't want to change nappies. Beowulf recounted, a serious look in his eyes. I don't wear nappies. And I know where the traders are. Arduino nodded. Beowulf was wearing an old blue t-shirt of hers with a print on the front of an otter wearing a sombrero and dancing in the middle of a bunch of other otters. I'm not like all the otters, it said. The shirt came down to the child's ankles. Beowulf drank his hot cocoa and ate his mashed potatoes and vegetarian gravy. Arduino was vegetarian. But he wouldn't touch the asparagus, said he wanted a hot dog, but that's what kids ate. She had laughed, and something snapped inside of her. She was, in fact, a robot trying to be human. Chapter 2, we're not selling this kid. We're not selling this kid for less than $75,000, the fat man growled into the phone. Have you seen what he can do? He barely walks, but he can paint like nobody's business. It's bleeping weird. He said as a small voice traveled from the man's cell phone across the room to where baby Sullian sat, painting. The traders had a fully stocked playroom, cribs lined up on one end. Currently, only 2 beds were occupied, one by Sullian and one by a sweet little girl a few months older than him, that the traders called Tempest. Baby Sullian focused on his canvas, which was really only a piece of paper on the floor. Finger painting was his way of dealing with stress. He'd been working nonstop since he'd arrived, sat surrounded by portraits of his parents and older brother. The pictures weren't that good. I mean, if he was 10, you wouldn't consider them good, but he was 14 months old. Faces emerged from masses of paint, revealing a gamut of expressions. Beowulf excited, the boy's mother contemplative, and their father angry, for example. There was another set of paintings piled in a corner that Sullian had painted earlier. If the traders had looked closely, they would have recognized themselves in a story. A genie drugs 2 people and 2 children are traded for a stack of bills. Chapter 3. Bleep, bleep, Beowulf screamed. Bleep, bleep, bleep. Arduino and Sullian came running in. What's the matter? Sullian asked, then smirking added, You don't like my new drawings of Santa? Arduino nudged Sullian. Well, if he wasn't that much shorter than her, being 8 years old, she would have nudged him. As it were, she touched the back of his shoulder and gave him a look that said, Now is not the time for jokes. Of course not, screamed Beowulf. I just received our 3rd quarter projections. Uh-oh, said Arduino. We're down 28%. Beowulf's face was red and his eyes flashing. We've been here before, Sullian replied. No, we haven't, yelled Beowulf. We've only existed for a year. Sullian shifted his feet and looked at Arduino. Don't worry, she said. We'll catch up. When Crash with Santa... Arduino searched for words. It was September, and they didn't even have a prototype yet. Chapter 4. Crash of Santa. Crash of Santa had started with a song Beowulf had recorded. He had never sung before. He was learning as he went. The song was not really a song, but a recreation of the theme music for Mario Kart. Beowulf beeped, dinged, cha-chinged, and trilled, voice mimicking the madcap ride of Mario through the game, a tour de force in both volume and enthusiasm. When you don't know the rules and don't care, well, Arduino shook her head. Boldness was never her strong suit, and boldness, she could see, could take a person far. In Crash of Santa, Beowulf's song launches the portly benefactor from his sleigh. He flies and flies, landing in another dimension. He tears the fabric of time and space. Yet the goal of the game was to deliver all the presents before Earth's children got up on Christmas morning. Absolute madness. The light twinkled in Beowulf's eyes as he explained how hard it was going to be to win. And they were going to release this bombshell a month before every child's favorite holiday.